Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike. I will be your host. This is the Leadership Toolkit, as you know, the definitive leadership growth podcast. So I'm super excited today. We have leaders from all different verticals of business. I have amazing conversations. I learn as much as I hope that they teach you when they come on the show. And so I've got an amazing guest today. I've got Laura Barnes. She's a Meta performance executive coach who works with clients to tap into their dreams, to create their actionable strategies and to actually reach what it is that they're going for rather than just talking about it. She is a coach of action. So she combines vision and mindset and strategy. She's absolutely brilliant at cutting through all of the noise and distractions to help people get out of their own way and level up their life. So with that, I'm excited to bring to you Miss Laura Barnes. Laura, how are you today?
Hi, Mike. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for making time to share with the audience and to share your insight this afternoon. If you
Yeah.
would do me a favor, just right as we come out of the gate, you were talking a little bit. You're in sports performance world, meta performance coach. Would you share with the audience kind of who you are, what you do, what's your leadership experience, and what do you do that makes the magic happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a really unique and sort of varied background. I did my undergraduate degree in sport management. I did a master's degree in sport management as well. But I actually spent a lot of my career in hospitality. And so hospitality is really what propelled me through a lot of things. There was a recession in 2008 when I graduated from my undergrad. So that is a lot of what drew me to continuing to work in hospitality. And that's where I developed a lot of my leadership skills as well. I bounced around through different careers. I worked in private service, so managing people's private homes. But sport was something that I was really passionate about, which is why I went back and got my master's in sport management, specialized in athlete development, which is essentially the leadership and life skills coaching of athletes. During a pandemic and all kinds of other things that were going on, really was just bringing leadership coaching and leadership skills to a college setting, to individuals who were open to receiving it. I was pretty open with how I provided that. But the consistent theme throughout all of my careers has been service and support of others. And I would say that that is really the through line, is that I believe in serving others. I believe in supporting their growth and development and really helping people reach the next level. So whether that's in sport performance, business performance, life performance, that is something that I'm really passionate about. So service and support of others is that through line. No matter what I'm doing to earn a paycheck, that's the thing that I really focus on and am passionate about.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. First off, I think it's absolutely awesome. Laura has shared with everybody here, if you want to connect with her and talk to her about leadership and coaching, you can certainly email her at Laura at leadershipbeyondsport.com. That's LEADERSHIP Leadership Beyond Sport. The reason I spell it out is for anybody that might be listening on the audio podcast later. Also, here's one that I think is absolutely awesome. You can call or text Laura. She's got her phone number. I'll have it on the screen every so often in the show. It's 970-379-4627. I advise anybody, a lot of times these leaders and coaches are willing to share their personal numbers and personal information. Maybe text her first rather than calling, start a conversation that way. So, Laura, thanks for being willing to share that stuff. So one of the things that you just brought up, and you said, your big thing is service and support of others.
Mhm.
I think that's really, really massively valuable when it comes to leadership. How what are some ways that you have seen in your career when you start coaching people, when you start leading people? What are a few things that someone in a leadership role can do to show that they're supportive of the people that they're getting ready to lead or coach?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know people talk all the time about servant leadership and wanting to, serve through their leadership, which is it's a great buzzword. But for me in the work that I do, it really comes down to understanding the vision of the people that you're leading. So, what is their vision of success for themselves? What is their vision of success in their careers? What is their vision of happiness? Like, there are so many different visions that you can kind of play with as a leader. But if you're leading a group of people, or if you're leading your family, or if you're leading yourself, and you
Mhm.
don't have a clear vision and what you're really working towards and why that matters, you're probably not going to be as effective. So I think it's a combination of both understanding the vision and what they're going after, and also understanding what motivates them. So often I think we see leaders who are motivating their people with chocolate ice cream and their team prefers vanilla. And it's like, you're not going to get the same level of effort and work and consistency out of them if you're motivating them with things that just don't quite hit the mark for them. So
Sure.
vision and motivation, I think, are the two keys.
So I'm gonna put you on the spot because, as everybody knows, we don't have a lot of discussion beforehand. I get in here and we want it to be really organic and conversational. One of the questions I have, because you said, okay, you got to understand the vision of others, and as a coach, so that's something that you do where you're constantly coaching people. What if somebody doesn't know? Because I think there's a lot of times, and I think you might agree with this. There's a lot of times we start to engage with somebody in business or in sports, athletes, that you say, hey, look, where are you headed? What's your end game?
Mm-hmm.
And they just can't quite put their finger on it. Do you have any tools or tactics for somebody from a coaching perspective or a leadership perspective that you could help to pull that vision out of somebody? How would you start that approach?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and it is absolutely common. It's not uncommon at all to meet somebody who goes like, I don't really know what my vision is, or I'm just at a weird place in my life, and like, I don't know, just being happy is my vision.
Sure.
So it starts off being really vague in some cases, or they go with the thing they think they should say. Sometimes in a coaching environment, it's like they're trying to impress the coach, or they're trying to impress their boss by saying like, oh, top sales guy of the year, that's my vision. And so getting really like having conversations and getting kind of granular with it is a good strategy. Having people get really specific. Okay, like happiness is your vision. What does happiness look like for you? And actually having put clear and concise and even measurable. I know that SMART goals are something that some people cringe at, but how would you measure happiness? How would you say like, oh, I'm happier this year than I was last year? So for people who don't have a vision, sometimes I say like, all right, let's think out like a year from now. Mike, you and I run into each other at DIA. We're crossing paths in the airport, and you
Sure.
are just lit up about what's going on in your life. You are over the moon, practically jumping for joy when you see me. And you're like, Laura, I can't wait to tell you what's going on in my life. What would be that for you? And that's kind of the question that I play with. So the other thing that we like to say, my colleagues and I, is like, it's okay to get a little drunk on vision, right? It's okay to go into that space of like daydreaming, fantasy land. A lot of us have been told over the years, get your head out of the clouds, keep your feet on the ground, be sensible, be logical. And vision tends to be not that. Vision tends to be, at least the way that I work with it and the way that I work with clients, it's a little bit more pie in the sky. It's a little bit more like, I have no idea how that would even happen, but it would be amazing. So giving people permission to dream big and to dream a little crazy, and telling them like, there's no right or wrong, right? Like your vision is yours. And so what lights you up, Mike, is going to be very different than what lights me up, other than leadership conversations. We have that in common.
Right.
uh,
Absolutely.
yeah. But I think giving people permission to go to that space that maybe they haven't tapped into in a while. And then also having them get specific and tapping into the why. Like, why does that matter to you? Why does being the top sales performer, why is that your vision? What would happen if that was the case? Like if that was reality for you?
No, I love that. And we've got a few folks watching. Hey, JB, how you doing today? He's like, yes, we got it. So what I'm hearing you say, that here's a few things, and I always like to repeat to make sure I'm getting it, because if I get it, I think people that are watching get it. So when I asked, how do you help people start to understand their vision? How do you start to help to plan that? I think you asked a really good question, and you started off with, well, what does that happiness look like? And then how do you measure it? And good to hear, JB. Thanks, man. I think it's, well, what does happiness look like? Because I think it's so often, and especially people that are maybe looking for performance coaches, athletes, people that are in business, you get a lot of type A personalities, but you have lots of others as well. But oftentimes, and I've heard, my background was in sales for years and years, right? And so money is always the scoreboard, right? The results, what's the number of sales and
Right.
what's the money? It's always the scoreboard. And I think it's important for people to be able to reframe that and say, okay, well, if it's not the dollar signs, what is happiness? And then I love the fact that you, and we've all heard it, SMART goals. I love the fact that you asked, what is the measurement?
Mhm.
because what's the number of high fives and hugs? What's the number of smiles that you're trying to take out of the
Right.
ATM? Like, how do you measure that? And then I also, and certainly in the intro, we're talking about how you help people turn dreams into their realities.
Mhm.
I think it's really valuable that you're reminding adults, use your imagination, dream and dream big, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so as a coach, and one of the things that you and I sort of talked about beforehand, I think it's one thing for people to try and figure it out. Because even as I said in this last question, I said, well, how do you do when they don't have the vision? You said, hey, there's an amazing number of people. So if you have people that don't have it quite all figured out, and I think there's a lot of people, especially right now in society, that are saying, hey, I need help, I want to grow, I don't know where to start, I don't know what to start with for myself. I think one of the questions you had mentioned was like, well, how or why can coaching change the game for them? Is it worth
Mhm.
just going to Google? Is it worth just going to, and I shouldn't say just, right? I've learned plenty
Right.
of stuff from Google and YouTube, as you have. But what's the difference between doing something like that and taking that self initiative versus engaging someone like you, Laura, and saying, well, okay, what's the difference with the coaching aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. The difference is the feedback. So, like you just mentioned, you wanted to restate what you heard me say to make sure that you are understanding it correctly.
Yes.
So, I don't know how many books you've read, but I don't know if any books have actually asked you like how you're understanding the material, right? Like a book doesn't talk back to you. So, and a book gives you a one size fits all approach. So it's going to be what worked for that author or worked for that author based on their research. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've learned some amazing things from books. In fact, that's how I gained a lot of my leadership skills over the years. So reading is phenomenal, but engaging with a coach, engaging with another live human being who can say, all right, like I'm hearing what you're saying. Is that what you actually mean?
Hmm.
Or I'm hearing what you're saying, but like your body language is telling me something different. Or like, but that's not what you were saying last week when we met. So what changed? Or did it change? And like helping people sort of hone in on what's going on, helping them see their blind spots. Like that's the difference between coaching and a book, a program, a podcast. No offense. Podcast again, they all have their place and they all bring
Absolutely.
great value, but it really depends on I think what level of leveling up you're looking for. If you're looking for like just the next like half step up, a book or a podcast or a Tony Robbins video might be the thing that gets you there. If you are looking for like max trajectory, just like flying off, in terms of you have no idea where you're going, like that I think requires feedback. It requires another human to engage with you in the process, and that's the value of coaching versus any other modality, in my opinion.
No, I absolutely would agree with you. I think you bring up a really good point that coaches are going to, and they'll offer hard feedback, right? They'll offer, or I shouldn't say hard, tough feedback, things that
Yeah.
are tough to hear, that we think, hey, I've got all this going right. Hey, I'm headed the right direction. And a coach a really good coach will probably look and go, yeah, that's good, but what about this? Right?
Mhm.
So let me ask you a question too, because so like I'm in a leadership role, and you have leaders at all kinds of different levels. You have high level executives, you have people that are maybe just coming into leadership, you have people that have been there for a while that you're probably engaging with, and you may have to remind them about the things they've forgotten.
Yeah.
What should somebody do if they're acknowledging, because one of the things where we talk about the leadership toolkit, one of the things that I always want to provide for leaders is, okay, well, what are the tools that I should look for? Because a lot of times leaders are those type A personalities. Hey, I'll go out and get this. I'll go out and make this thing. I'll go out and take action and go after this. So if somebody is in one of those positions, leadership or management role, and they're looking for a coach, what are the top like 3 to 5 things? Because and let me set this up too, for everybody. So this is not a shameless plug. Right? I'm asking
Right.
because that's what you do for a living. That's how I can learn. What are 3 to 5 things, if it was me looking for someone to coach me and level up, what are 3 to 5 things that I should be looking for?
So just to make sure I'm understanding the question, what you want to know what things people should be looking for when they're interviewing coaches, for lack of a better
Yeah,
term?
I've decided I need a coach to get to this next level in my career, or this next level in in my leadership or management ability,
Mhm.
how should I start? How should I start
Yeah.
interviewing that person or talking to them?
Absolutely. So I think the first step is like you have to know what you're going after. So how do they support you in figuring out that piece initially? My colleagues and I within Meta Performance, it's a free vision call, and many of us will do multiple vision calls with someone. So if that first hour you're not crystal clear on this is what I want and I'm so pumped up about it and send me the contract, I'm ready to sign up, I'll do another hour with you. I'll do another 2 hours. Like if that's what it takes for you to get super clear on what you need and what's going to really light you up and be something that's worth sacrificing for, something that's worth going after. So I think that piece is really critical, like making sure that when you end the call with that coach, and most coaches offer a complimentary call initially to kind of get things started and
Sure.
get things going. But there should be some level of like having an opportunity to experience their coaching. And you should leave that call feeling totally lit up, totally inspired, like motivated, like you've never been motivated before by your own life and your own dreams. And if that's not how you're feeling, maybe it's either have another conversation with that person or maybe think about finding other sources. I would also say that it's important to make sure there's connection, right there. Like you have to enjoy talking to the person. So if you're totally shut down, you're not receptive to what they're saying, they're just very off-putting in their mannerisms, their style. We talked a little bit before we came on, like I sometimes cuss, and that can be sort of off-putting for some people. So I like to make that known. Like, and if that's a problem, let me know, and I will tone myself down in that. Like, I will edit myself, right? But making sure that you have a good rapport with that coach, because they're gonna be giving you tough feedback, and the
Mhm.
coaching space can be really vulnerable and it can be really challenging as the coachee and sometimes as the coach as well. Like I don't want to work with a client who I'm not on board with their vision. I want to believe in what they're going after, because that's what's going to make it fun. And I think that being clear on what you want the relationship to look like. Do you want a coach who's a taskmaster? That's a very different style than a coach who's a cheerleader and motivator. That's a very different style than a
Absolutely.
coach who's a combination of all of these things. So I think just having conversations and getting, and I think a little bit is also trusting your intuition, having the conversation and being like, that didn't quite land the way I was hoping it would. I don't feel that jazzed about it. And it's okay to say that. Like as coaches, we get told no just as often as we get told yes, if not more. So
Sure.
like a no is not going to ruin my day and it's not going to make me change careers. So yeah.
Well, and I think what's valuable for what you're saying there, and there's a couple things I want to come back to. One that I should have asked you at the very beginning, but we're going to go there anyway in just a minute. Um, I just recapped sort of the three things you said. One, how do they support you? Two, is their connection and rapport. I love the fact that you said you should leave like on fire. You should be fired
Mhm.
up and passionate. Like this is the person I have to work with. And then the last one, you said trust your intuition. I said trust your gut. I think it's one of those things like we know if you have connection with somebody, if I can look them in the eyes and I feel connected to them and so forth, if you're not feeling that, if you're not feeling on fire, and I think it's valuable that you said, hey, I get told no more times than not. I think sometimes we go through that as leaders, we go through that initial conversation, or we go through that initial training, and then we feel this obligation because most leaders are often servant leaders. They want to connect and grow with people. So they're like, well, I want to try and fit this in the box. And I think it's valuable for anybody that's listening or watching this, keep that in mind. The first and foremost, when you're looking for a coach, you got to be true to yourself and really do
Mhm.
trust that gut. One of the things, so I introduced you at the beginning, but I want you to explain this now. I mean, we're only 20 minutes in. I should have asked in the first five. But so when you say meta performance executive coach, like for me, performance coach I get, executive coach I get, what can you define that for me? What is you, because you said that again just now. You said, hey, if you're interviewing a meta performance coach, you got to make sure that they're the right person for you.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so meta performance, in this concept or in this situation, we're talking about metamorphosis, transformation. So this is
Oh,
transformational coaching.
got it.
It is taking you from where you are now and where you want to go, and where you want to go might seem completely unrealistic fantasy land. But it'd be really cool if you could get there. So meta performance is really about helping people go beyond high performance. We tend to work with a lot of, like you said, type A's, high performers, people who are really focused on being the best, outdoing the person next to them. But really, it's just about, it's like, how do you go beyond that? Like, what happens after high performance? What happens if you get to the point where you are salesman of the year and you're the best at what you do, or you've won, the Super Bowl or the Stanley Cup and you are the best at what you do? Then what? And that's a challenge that a lot of high performers think about. So meta performance is going beyond high performance. It's tapping into the question of what am I capable of, as opposed to simply how can I be the best.
So, and just to be clear, I'm clearing that for everybody, because I know that you and I've talked a little bit beforehand. So that leads me to a series of questions then. So if someone is already that high performer, and let's say I'm in a leadership role and I'm coaching them, and what do you recommend for somebody? I want to think of how I want to frame this question. If they're a leader and they're coaching somebody and someone gets to the absolute top of their game, what happens if I get them as far as I can take them? In a leadership role, doesn't that take admitting failure or bruising ego? Or how do I help get somebody past that if I'm their leader or manager?
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought in the bruised ego, or like thinking that you're a failure as their leader if you got them. I mean, if they're at the top of their game,
Mhm.
that's great, right? Like that's a success for them. So that's when I would bring it back to their vision. Like, what is the vision for their next chapter? If they hit, the sales target for the year, or they hit whatever, whatever the metric was, they hit that. Okay, what's next? Like what, and not in a you have to do more and hustle and grind and work harder, but okay, what is your vision? Like what, again, tapping into that vision and that thing that like really lights you up, kind of lights that fire in your belly.
Mhm.
As a leader, tapping into that with your people is really powerful. I also say like investing in your people. So getting that, like that might mean investing in coaching for your team, because you may not, as a leader, I think part of leadership is understanding that you may not have all of the skills needed to support your people in every way, right? Like you might be a
No,
leader
say it
in
ain't so.
you might be a leader in business. You're probably not a licensed mental health practitioner, so you probably shouldn't be also a counselor for your employees, right? So
Sure.
understanding that there might be limits to your leadership, and if you want to keep those employees, in your company and engaged, like bringing in the right resources to help them tap into that if you don't have those skills. But yeah, understanding what their vision is, and giving them the opportunity to dream and to say, hey, like if you've outgrown your position with this company, that's okay. But what would the next piece be? And how can I, as a leader, help get you there? Is it making connections? Is it, are there courses that you want to take? Is there learning that you want to acquire? So there are things that you can do as a leader, but understanding that in some cases, the mark of a good leader is that people outgrow you because they've gotten so many skills and abilities and they're so ready for the next challenge, and you have prepared them for that.
That's awesome. And I've said something similar, because and people, I think people in leadership roles need to understand that for any of us, and not to put unnecessary limits on people, but we all have a limit for where we're at right now.
Right.
Unless we've got to the top of our game and we're headed for a meta performance coach and we're going past that limit. Um, but I agree with you. I think it's important to understand where you are in your leadership. I
Hmm.
think it's important to understand where you're at for who it is you're coaching. I've said this before, and I I think I took this from somebody, but you could comment on this if you agree or disagree. Like as a salesperson, if I get to that point and I'm a like level 9 or 10 salesperson, right? And I'm
Hmm.
rocking and jamming, and my leader is like a level 8 leader or level 8 salesperson,
Hmm.
how long is that level 10 salesperson that needs a meta performance coach, that needs a next level, going to follow that 7 or 8 leader for? And so I think that's one of those hard questions as leaders we have to ask ourselves, and we have to level up as leaders. We have to say, okay, well, what's the next thing for me? Do you have recommendations? Where should I, as uh, besides coaching, because you mentioned books earlier, we've talked a lot about coaching and so forth. Do you have suggestions? Do you think primarily it's just coaching, or what would some other resources be if I realize I'm in that position? I keep bringing these salespeople up to level 8, 9s, and 10s, and I'm not moving as a leader.
Mhm.
What approach should I take? What action should I take for myself to level up as a leader, so that I can maybe, and not that you want to hang on to people for a really long time, but so that I can coach them past the point I've been coaching them for a number of years?
Yes, that's I hate to keep beating the same drum, but part of that is like, what's your vision for yourself as a leader? Like, is your vision of you as a leader being a level 10, a level 20 leader? Or is your vision to be like, I love this job, I love this company, I love the culture here. My job is to grow and develop. And the thing that I'm passionate about, my vision is to grow and develop amazing people for as long as I can until I retire and go, open a surf shop in Florida, right? Like, what is your vision for where you want to be? Because I love working with high performers. I love working with people who want to continue growing and evolving. And I think that most of us are capable of far more than we're actually experiencing. Um,
Absolutely.
but that doesn't mean that everybody wants that for themselves. And so I would ask a leader who's in that situation of, saying, I'm an level 8 leader, and I have all these people who are, you know, 8s, 9s, and 10s who are leaving the company because they've outgrown my leadership. Is maybe that's okay. Maybe that's not a bad thing if it's still a good fit. That's my personal opinion on it. But being realistic about what you want as a leader from yourself, because I think that self leadership is where it starts. So you have to be real about A, where you're at currently, B, where you want to go, and
Mhm.
C, how you're going to get there. Because if you're totally cool with the level of leadership you have, maybe there's actually not a problem, and maybe you don't need coaching. Maybe there's nothing wrong with that. But if there is something more that you want, that's the thing that you need to explore. And we talk a lot about a way of being in coaching. So like,
Mhm.
if you are coming into work every day and you are fired up and you are loving your job and you are committed and you're leading your team with integrity and passion and excitement, and things are humming and clicking and everything's great, maybe that's okay. But if you want more, let's get clear on what the more is and why you want that.
So I'm going to key in on one thing you said right there, because I think that's something that is really hard for people. First off, I think you pointed out the fact, because it is easy for us as leaders and people that, especially in servant leadership, though it can be a buzzword right now, like it's important for all, I think, in general, people, and this is the lens I see the world through, but like, we always want people to grow, we always want them to be moving along, and so we do get concerned what their vision is. And there's two
Mhm.
things I'm going to key in on, because you did point it out, and I know it has been a hub of the conversation, but like, what's the vision for yourself? I think it's easy to lose ourselves in an environment where we're so concerned with everybody else's success that we can lose sight of ours. And so I think it is
Yeah.
worthwhile what you said, like, what's your vision for yourself? What do you want to see for yourself? How are you going to grow? And beyond, I also agree with you, though this is an amazing podcast, if I do say so myself. I think that and we have these conversations, and there's opportunities for people to ask questions if they have them, and we have real conversations back and forth. But there is only so much legitimate feedback you can get from something like that. That may be a catalyst, it may be a Kickstarter, but in the long term, I agree with you. I think you need to be able to um, I think you need to be able to have somebody to help push or pull you along, and offer that real genuine feedback. And then, when you're asking, how do you get there? Where are you at? Where do you want to go? And how do you get there? And the thing I'm going to hang on at the very end, you said, well, you got to get clear. I think it's so easy for leaders. I think it's so easy for people to get cloudy,
Oh
right?
yeah.
It's so easy because I mean, we get so distracted. There's so much stuff going on. And if you listen, depending on who you subscribe to, right? Like, when I sit down and have these one-on-one conversations with people like you, Laura, I sit down, and like, for that 45 minutes or an hour, I just can be focused on you and having good conversations. I learn as much for myself as I do that I hope my audience is taking out of it.
Yeah.
But on that daily basis, it's so easy to, be got one eye over here going, well, Gary Vee says I got to put out 47 pieces of content today, and so I got to do that. And what am I doing this? And it's very easy to lose clarity in
Mhm.
our current environment, in my opinion. So
Yeah, and I think a lot of us fall into the trap of shoulds, right? I should be doing this. I should be further along. I should be making X amount of money. Shoulding all over yourself is what we say
I've
in
heard
meta
that.
performance, right?
Yeah.
Like, stop shooting all over yourself. So it's not about what somebody else thinks you should do. It's not about what your parents think you should do. It's not about what even your spouse thinks you should do. That's certainly a factor and needs to be considered. I'm not saying disregard your spouse and do whatever you want, right? That leads to a whole other level of issues. But understanding, like, what are the stories you're telling yourself about why that's important or why you should be doing that or why that even matters. And I work with clients and having those conversations where, like, sometimes they'll say, like, oh yeah, I should be doing this, and I'm like, why? Like, tell me why you should do that, or tell me who said you should do that. And so having those conversations, and again, having somebody who's willing to give you that feedback and say things to you that might not be said by other people, right? It's pretty easy to be like, oh, well, my partner said I should. Like, okay, well, different conversation. Or society said I should, or, that kind of, but we tell ourselves stories, and then those stories, we think they become who we are. And so we
Right.
let that dictate our actions, as opposed to having a really honest look at the stories we're telling ourselves, where they came from, and why we're choosing to keep them in place. Because you're benefiting from having that story playing in the background.
Right.
And that's what people, a lot of times, like, you don't want to give up the story, because giving up the story means, like, you're going to have to change something, and change is uncomfortable. So people avoid it.
That yeah, change is super uncomfortable. I want to remind some folks too, and I'm going to go back to one of the another statement you made because I think it's really powerful. And then one of the things we talked about before, one of the things that Laura has been so kind to share with our audience, if you're not connected with her, a couple ways you can get connected, and that's to email her at laura@leadershipbeyondsport.com. You can check out her website there. You can book a call with her. You can connect with her on LinkedIn. Um, so leadershipbeyondsport.com. The other way, and I always think it's really awesome when I have people that are, leaders and coaches and such on the show. She's willing to share her phone number. Again, my recommendation, I'm saying this, not her. Maybe text her first, but she's sharing her number. If you wanted to connect with Laura on text or phone, 970-379-4627. And that's a number not far from me. I'm here in Colorado Springs. We were talking
Yeah.
beforehand that you're from you said Western Colorado.
Hmm.
And so if anyone wants to connect that way, that's a great way to get a conversation started. Get a conversation started on coaching. Get a network started with Laura, because it's something that it, like we always say, you're the sum of your five closest people. And when you can bring positive influencers and positive influences into your life, that's something that's hugely beneficial. So Laura, I really thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to hang on, and I think this is so powerful. If people are taking notes right now, write this down. It's one of the most powerful questions that you can ask yourself, you can ask anybody else. And Laura hung on it. It's just simply why? Why?
Hmm.
We don't we don't use that question enough in our toolkit when it comes to leadership, when it comes to coaching, when it comes to sales. I mentioned earlier, I've been in sales for years, and one of the things that often comes up is, people will say or do one thing, and I'm like, well, did you ask them why? And inevitably people are like, well, no. And it's always because, like, the answer might be uncomfortable. The answer to yourself might be uncomfortable. The answer you get from someone else might be uncomfortable. And so I just don't think we use that question enough. And
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we also assume we know the answer. So we
true.
avoid asking because we're like, oh, well, I already know this. Like, I'm going to skip that step of having the conversation, uncomfortable or otherwise, and just move on to the next thing, because we're in such a hurry to do more and to be constantly doing, because doing is like the measure of success by our society in so many ways. So the more we do, the better we look, or so we think. And so
Yeah.
you don't, if you avoid asking the question because you assume you know the answer, then you can just go on to doing the next thing. Yeah, so I think that's definitely a big part of it. And I have a fun exercise if people want to play this game. Um,
I'm down.
I learned it from a fitness and nutrition coach years ago, And I've seen it used by other coaches as well, but I call it the 7 layers deep exercise. And so you write out, the statement of the thing that you want, right? In the fitness space, it was, I want to lose X number of pounds, right? Or I want to live this lifestyle, or I want to be vegan. Okay, why? Like, why is that important to you? And then to that question, you answer that question, why is that important to you? And then you answer it again, why is that important to you? And you do that 7 times. It might not take you 7 times to get there, but if you can answer that question 7 different times of like, why is that previous comment or previous statement important to you? You're actually going to come up with a much different answer than simply like, oh, I want to look good in front of the mirror. Like, maybe you care about something way bigger than just looking good in front of the mirror, and that's why you want to lose weight or be the best salesperson in your company, right? Maybe being top sales guy means that your dead grandfather will love you more. Like, I don't know, right? But there are those, when we go that level of depth with it, when we ask that many times, like, why does that matter? You get a much different answer than you would at the surface level. Just like, why does it matter? Oh, because it would make me happy. Right.
Why would it make you happy? And then you
Yeah,
keep going from that. No, I
exactly.
love that. And I've shared similar, man, you and I are absolutely on the same page right there, because I've shared similar, and I love that statement. So one of the other things that you brought up, because we're talking a lot about coaching and moving forward and taking action and asking why and being clear and
Mm-hmm.
all of these things. And one of the things that you'd sent me, because I always get a few little cliff notes, right? Like I said, I try and keep the conversation very organic. But one of the things, and I'm really interested to hear your response on this, was let's talk some about default versus generative futures. So can
Yes.
you explain that? Like what? And I part of the reason I bring it up now is because I think it's valuable. I think, and I'm asking why, but I think I know some of what you're going to share, because we are talking about coaching and moving forward and being clear. So what is default versus generative futures?
Yeah. So the way I define it, which, it might be defined a little bit differently depending on the coach you talk to as far as their
Sure.
examples, but the way I define it is a default future is what you're going to get if you just keep doing things the way you've been doing them. You don't make a whole lot of changes. Right. Maybe it's, I want to increase my sales this year. Cool. So maybe if you work a little harder, have a few more meetings, you might increase your sales. So it's not going to require a lot from you to create that outcome. So default future is sort of like the default outcome you're going to get by doing what you've always been doing, or by making slight changes, slight adjustments here and there. Whereas a generative future is, it comes back to vision. Shocking, I know. But if you have a really clear vision of what you want to create for yourself, then, like, since you're from Colorado, I'll use this example.
Mhm.
You're down in the Springs, right?
Yep, I'm in the
Okay.
Springs.
So if you wanted to go to Denver, and you plugged Denver into your GPS, your vision is, I'm going to Denver. And if you
Correct.
put that into your GPS isn't going to tell you to go south on I-25 from Colorado Springs,
Correct.
right? So, like, and people who aren't from Colorado, that may or may not make sense. So I apologize. But
We're
uh,
going north for an hour.
right. Exactly. So the generative future is when you are so locked in on your vision, other options that aren't going to get you there sort of fall away. And so you start generating resources and opportunities and possibilities based on the clarity that you have and the determination you have for that vision. So again, like I use the GPS example pretty often, but your GPS is never going to take you the opposite direction of where you want to go unless there's a valid reason, but there usually isn't. So getting clear on your vision, locking that in, that's how you start creating that generative future where all other options and possibilities fall away. Those are no longer considerations, and possibilities that you hadn't even considered start becoming available to you because you're so clear that, like, whatever it's going to take to get me there, I'll do it. So that's the generative versus default future.
I like that analogy. I like the GPS, because it makes me it makes me think too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like if I'm headed that direction and I'm headed to Denver, which again for anybody watching or listening is an hour north of me, give or take, right? And if you're in construction season here in Colorado, that's actually the fifth season of the year, right? You got spring, summer, construction, fall, and winter.
Right.
And so if you're in construction season and there's stuff going on I-25, then your GPS might take you around a little bit different route,
Yep.
right? And so that's a route you may not have considered. And the interesting thing is you're sharing this, like I'm visualizing it in my head because I've traveled back and forth to Denver so many times. All of a sudden, even though I've taken that route, who knows how many hundreds of times since I was a kid, it takes me just one block off the beaten path. And now I see things that I've never seen or experienced before.
Yeah. Yeah, all
Right.
of a sudden you're like, there's a coffee shop there that I've never seen, or like I'm super into music and there's a guitar store that I've never found before, right? Like
Right.
things that you didn't know existed because you never chose to take that path because there was no reason to. So yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to frame it.
I love that. I, no, I really love that. One other thing that you were talking about, and I want to get to this before we close because we're sort of on the tail end here, is when you were talking about outsourcing. Well,
Mm.
unless we're going to go Joe Rogan style, I got 4 hours. Well, I don't
I got
really have
time too.
4
I just don't know how
hours.
long people want to hang out, but
So when you were talking about, you said, hey, let's talk about, the power of outsourcing when it
Mhm,
comes to, and you're referring to it in like coaching and leadership, power of outsourcing. I think you specifically said not talking about going overseas for jobs. So
right.
what do you mean that, because there is power in outsourcing, can you frame that up for the audience a little bit and share what you're talking about?
Yeah. So for me, when I talk about outsourcing, I'm talking about, again, like my background in hospitality and working in private service, people outsource to me, right? I was the person they
Okay.
brought in to do the things that they didn't want to do, didn't have time to do. It wasn't, they didn't, like, it just didn't matter to them, right? So
Sure.
outsourcing to me is getting really clear on what are your gifts? What are the things that only you are able to do towards your vision, towards the things that matter in life? Because that is what you're here for. That is what you were uniquely designed to do, is to bring those gifts to the world in some way, shape, or form. And there's a whole lot of stuff that we do in our day that we probably don't have to be the one doing it if we could find a creative way to solve that problem. So outsourcing is everything. I mean, especially nowadays, like we have so many options. Like outsourcing could be having somebody else buy your groceries for you. Like if that gives you an extra hour in your week that you can spend focusing on your dream, is it worth it? Is it worth the whatever the Instacart annual subscription is so that you never have to pay a delivery fee, right? You can order
Sure.
groceries every day of the week if you want. So things like groceries, doing your laundry. Like I know people get so funny about this, but like you can outsource these things. There are pick up, wash, dry, fold locations that will do your laundry for you. And so it's really just about getting over the story in your head of my way is the only way, or my way is the right way, or my way is the best way. Therefore, I have to do it,
Right.
and understanding that there are plenty of people and plenty of ways out there that you can let somebody else do this for you. Great example. I was talking to a client the other day, and making more phone calls and setting up appointments was a focus for this client. And so we were talking about it. And one of the things that came up was like, you have an hour commute every day, but you can't be on your phone and driving and looking at your calendar and scheduling meetings. So,
Sure.
what if you got an Uber, like maybe even just twice a week, like maybe an Uber twice a week, and sitting in the back seat where somebody doesn't necessarily expect you to talk to them. You
Mhm.
can make those calls and you can do what you need to do. And as a former Uber driver, I can tell you, people did it all the time. Right? They would get work done in the back seat of my Uber while I drove them to and from work. And so it's about being creative in how we take back the time we need to pursue the things that only we can do.
It's crazy that you bring that up. Like absolutely crazy. I was scrolling through Instagram this morning and I don't even know who posted it. I don't have a clue. Um, but there was a statement, there was a placard or a meme that said, uh, it's crazy that you bring this up. It's just mind blowing to me because like how I believe God puts things in our way to say, hey, pay attention to this. And so when you're talking about outsourcing those everyday things, it was, the headline was something along the lines of, how to make more millions or how to make your billions like the billionaires is to outsource and recapture your time. And
Hmm.
so it's exactly what you're saying. And I think the examples they gave was quite so, I mean, so that's so valuable to hear that, because one of the examples they gave was like doing the lawn. Now, for me,
Yeah.
I enjoy doing the lawn. I get to unwind where I'm not in front of technology, and I do have someone do my lawn from time to time. But that's also something that I personally can say, well, I don't have to mess with anything. Like, I don't have to think about stuff. I'm not in front of social media. I'm just
Yeah.
walking and daydreaming to myself. That's my daydream time. But I
Yeah.
think it's really interesting that you share that, and it's really valuable. And like what you're bringing up with, what about the hour Uber drive? Well, how long does the hour Uber drive, or excuse me, how long does the hour Uber drive? An hour. Okay, thanks. Uh, what does the
I
what
thought it was
does
a brain teaser. I wasn't sure what the answer was going to be.
no, I just, that's my brain goes nee and messes up. So eh, what does the hour Uber drive cost you?
Hmm.
And you have to look at not just what's the monetary cost, but what's the time and energy cost, and what can you recuperate that? And I think some of those are immeasurable, but there's also like what you're saying. Hey, if you can book your calendar and you can, I mean, I'm guessing, but say an hour Uber drive costs $100. Can you generate more than $100 twice a week to do that? Like, that's something I wouldn't have even considered. I think that's really,
Yeah.
really powerful, especially for people that are, very high level performers, people that are at their top of their game. You've used the top sales consultant several times. If you're a top sales consultant, can I generate, more appointments, more income in that hour drive by paying somebody to set up a mobile office? Like, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's again, it's getting super like tapping into your own resourcefulness. And that's something
Mhm.
that I love having conversations with clients about, because most of us haven't been tasked with that throughout our years, right? I'm very fortunate. I grew up with parents who, to go outside and play, go figure it
Mhm.
out, right? Like go have fun. So we had, like, as the youngest of three, I have two older brothers. Like, we were resourceful. We figured out how to build a tree house. It was not a good tree house. We did not do a great job, but we built it on our own with materials that were found, I think, like behind dumpsters at the grocery store or something, right?
Yep.
Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, but not everybody had that experience. Not everybody had opportunities in life where they were expected to discover their own resourcefulness. And so I think that that's another challenge that we're seeing, especially with younger generations, is that they've predominantly had somebody there to entertain them. And so they haven't had to find a way to entertain themselves or be
Right.
resourceful or come up with a solution on their own. And so, especially like when we talk about outsourcing, I think the reason a lot of people don't do it is there's a desire for control, right? Like, I want to be in charge of this. If I
Sure.
want it done right, I have to do it myself. There's maybe a little bit of perfectionism, right? Like, I can tell you there are about a dozen different ways to clean a bathroom, and I don't have to be the one doing it. Like, as long as it's clean, I don't actually care how it gets done, right? So there are things that come up for us that we don't have to tap into our own resourcefulness, so we choose not to, and we also choose to continue that story of, perfectionism, how it has to be done. There's only one way to do it. There's only one right way. So really, I think those are the things that keep us from exploring that, and even thinking like, well, if I didn't want to drive, how would I get past it? Like, if you didn't have a car and you needed to get to Denver,
Sure.
let's say your car broke down, your engine blows, and you need to get to Denver tomorrow, and you don't have a second car in your house, so you have no, like, but you have to be in Denver. You're going to figure out a way to get there,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
You be
you
resourceful in that
actually,
moment.
well, and there's two things, because one, you have an acronym for that, and I do want you to share it. Right, you're going to figure out how to get there, and then the other is, I've heard it said before. One of my mentors, he's always said, "Look, it's not a lack of resources; it's a lack of resourcefulness." And I think
Yeah.
that actually comes from Tony Robbins. If I think about it, I've heard it multiple places. I will tell you, folks, we're coming to the tail end here today on the Leadership Toolkit. And so, I'd really like to give a shout out and a big thank you to Laura Barnes for joining me today on the show and on this episode. I would encourage everybody to make sure, if you didn't see it or get it earlier, make sure you connect with Laura. You can contact her via phone. I'd recommend texting first at 970-379-4627. You can connect with her there. Or certainly you can email Laura@leadershipbeyondsport.com. Again, a big shout out to her today. We're right at the tail end of the hour. So I'm going to go ahead and take us out. Do me a favor for everybody. If you've gained something out of this episode, and I'm sure that you have, I mean, Laura had just a ton of wisdom and insight to share with us. make sure you connect with her. Do me a favor and share this episode, share this podcast episode. Make sure that you throw some thumbs up on it, because that's one of the ways that the podcast keeps growing. Check it out on Spotify. You can go to spotify.theleadershiptoolkit.com. I appreciate you all very much. I value your time. I thank you. And I will tell you, everybody, until we meet again next week, I do this every Wednesday at 12:05 p.m. Mountain Time. Until we meet next, stay great. We'll talk soon, everybody.